Are you eating what you believe is a healthy diet, but your energy is low, your weight keeps creeping up, and your doctor says your blood markers are getting worse? Here's a more uncomfortable question. What if one of the most common foods in your kitchen is quietly feeding cancer cells, not by being toxic, but by creating the perfect internal environment for them to thrive? Now let me be very clear right from the start. Cancer is not caused by one food, and health is never about fear or perfection. But cancer does respond to biology, and biology responds to what you eat every day. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your body is constantly creating abnormal cells. All of us, every single day. The reason most of us stay healthy is because our immune system, metabolism, and blood supply work together to starve, suppress, and eliminate those cells before they can grow. Cancer doesn't appear out of nowhere. It grows when the internal terrain becomes favorable. And one of the fastest ways to make that terrain favorable is through chronic metabolic dysfunction, high insulin, fatty liver, inflammation, and unstable blood sugar. This is why this topic matters so deeply for energy, fat loss, healthy aging, and longevity, not just cancer prevention. Because the same foods that drive insulin resistance, the same foods that overload the liver, the same foods that promote visceral fat and inflammation, are the same foods that fuel cancer cell survival pathways. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your body like a city. Cancer cells are not the criminals. They're the conditions that allow crime to flourish. If the streets are well lit, security is strong, and resources are balanced, crime stays low. But if energy floods the system unchecked, law enforcement weakens, and waste piles up, problems grow. In your body, that unchecked energy is often excess sugar and refined carbohydrates driving insulin and growth signals. And here's the part most people miss. Cancer cells don't just want calories. They want glucose spikes, growth hormones, and constant fuel availability. So today, we're not talking about fear. We're talking about strategy. In this video, I'll walk you through the single worst dietary driver that feeds cancer biology, and why it's not just about sugar itself, but what sugar does hormonally and metabolically. We'll break this down step by step, like we're standing at a whiteboard together. You'll learn why certain foods signal cells to grow at all costs, how insulin and the liver play a central role, and how simple, practical changes can shift your internal environment toward protection, fat loss, and long-term health. And if this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I share science-based tools like this regularly to help you take control of your health naturally. Let's start by laying out the 6 key insights we'll cover. Before we go deeper, let me give you a clear roadmap of where we're headed, because once you see the full picture, everything starts to make sense. Today, we'll unpack 6 science-backed insights that explain why one category of food is uniquely dangerous for cancer biology and what to do about it. Here's what we'll cover. First, we'll look at how rapidly absorbed carbohydrates act as a growth signal, not just fuel, and why cancer cells are uniquely addicted to that signal. Second, we'll break down the role of insulin, a hormone most people associate only with diabetes, and why chronically high insulin creates an internal environment where cancer cells gain a survival advantage. Third, we'll talk about the liver, specifically fatty liver and metabolic overload, and how the liver becomes a silent accomplice in feeding cancer-promoting pathways when it's overwhelmed. Fourth, we'll examine chronic inflammation and oxidative stress, how certain foods turn on inflammatory signals that protect cancer cells from immune attack. Fifth, we'll discuss angiogenesis, the process by which tumors build their own blood supply, and how specific dietary patterns either fuel or suppress this process. And finally, sixth, we'll move into solutions, how strategic nutrition, timing of meals, fasting windows, and specific protective foods can cut off cancer's supply lines while improving energy, fat loss, and longevity at the same time. This is important to understand. We are not talking about restriction, we are not talking about fear, and we are definitely not talking about perfection. We are talking about biological leverage, small changes that shift powerful systems inside your body. Each of the next sections will focus on one of these mechanisms, explained simply, with real-world analogies and practical steps you can apply immediately. By the end of this video, you'll be able to look at food differently, not as good or bad, but as information that either feeds disease or supports resilience. Now let's start at the foundation, with the single most misunderstood concept in cancer metabolism. Here's the key insight most people never hear. The worst food that feeds cancer cells is not a single ingredient, it's a category. Rapidly absorbed carbohydrates that spike blood sugar and insulin. This includes refined sugar, white flour, sweetened beverages, ultra-processed snacks, and even foods that look healthy when eaten in excess or without metabolic context. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Cancer cells are metabolically different from healthy cells. They rely heavily on glucose fermentation, even when oxygen is available, a phenomenon known in cancer biology as the Warburg effect. What this means, in simple terms, is this. Cancer cells are inefficient but aggressive. They burn sugar fast, wastefully, and continuously, because sugar allows them to divide rapidly. But sugar alone isn't the whole story. The real problem is what sugar does hormonally. Every time you eat a meal that rapidly raises blood glucose, your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin's job is to move glucose into cells, but it also sends a powerful secondary message: grow, store, divide. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of insulin as fertilizer. In a healthy garden, fertilizer helps plants grow strong. But if weeds are present, fertilizer doesn't discriminate. It feeds them too. Cancer cells have more insulin receptors than normal cells. They are hypersensitive to growth signals. So when insulin is chronically elevated, from frequent snacking, sugary drinks, refined carbs, or late-night eating, you're not just supplying calories. You're turning on growth pathways like IGF-1 and mTOR that cancer cells exploit. What the research shows is that elevated insulin and IGF-1 levels are associated with increased cancer risk and poorer outcomes across multiple cancer types, including breast, colorectal, pancreatic, and prostate cancers. Now here's where people get confused. They say, but I don't eat sugar, I eat grains, I eat fruit juice, I eat low-fat foods. Your body doesn't care what the label says. It cares how fast glucose enters your bloodstream. White bread, sweet cereal, fruit juice, flavored yogurt, energy bars, these can spike blood sugar as fast as soda, and frequency matters just as much as quantity. If insulin never gets a break, your metabolism never switches into repair mode, your immune system stays distracted, and abnormal cells get more time and fuel to survive. This is why we see such a strong overlap between insulin resistance, obesity, fatty liver, and cancer risk. So what do you do, practically? First, reduce insulin spikes, not just sugar grams. Prioritize whole foods with fiber, protein, and healthy fats. Avoid liquid calories, especially fruit juice and sweetened drinks. Eat carbohydrates after protein and vegetables to slow absorption. Second, create insulin-free windows. A 12-14-hour overnight fasting window allows insulin to fall. This activates cellular cleanup processes like autophagy. Third, be strategic, not extreme. You don't need perfection. You need consistency. And if this explanation is helping you see food differently, consider subscribing. I post evidence-based content like this regularly to help you take control of your health, without fear and without medication. Next, we're going deeper into the liver and why a fatty, overworked liver quietly amplifies these same cancer-feeding signals. Now let's talk about the organ that quietly sits at the center of this entire conversation, the liver. Most people think of the liver as a detox organ, but metabolically, it's more accurate to think of the liver as your body's traffic controller for energy, hormones, and growth signals. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Every gram of sugar and refined carbohydrate you eat passes through the liver first. If the liver is healthy, flexible, and insulin sensitive, it can manage that flow. But when sugar intake is frequent, not excessive in one sitting, just frequent, the liver becomes overloaded, Excess glucose is converted into fat inside liver cells. Over time, this leads to non-alcoholic fatty liver, which now affects nearly 1 in 3 adults globally. And this matters deeply for cancer biology. A fatty liver becomes insulin resistant. When that happens, the pancreas compensates by releasing more insulin. So now you have higher baseline insulin, higher circulating glucose, and impaired metabolic control. This creates a perfect internal environment for abnormal cells to survive. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine the liver as a sponge. A healthy sponge absorbs water and releases it when needed. But once it's saturated, water spills everywhere. A fatty liver is a saturated sponge. Glucose spills into the bloodstream. Insulin spills higher. Growth signals spill outward into every tissue. Cancer cells don't need much. They just need permission. And insulin provides that permission. What the research shows is that fatty liver disease is associated with increased risk of liver cancer itself, but also higher rates of breast, colorectal, pancreatic, and esophageal cancers. Why? Because the liver regulates IGF-1, a powerful growth hormone that cancer cells exploit. When the liver is inflamed and insulin resistant, IGF-1 signaling becomes dysregulated. At the same time, fatty liver produces inflammatory cytokines, chemical messengers that weaken immune surveillance and protect tumor cells from destruction. So again, this isn't about one food, it's about metabolic context. This is why people who eat healthy but snack all day, drink smoothies, or rely on low-fat, high-carb foods can still end up metabolically compromised. Now here's the empowering part. The liver is incredibly resilient. Even modest changes can rapidly improve liver fat and insulin sensitivity. Here are practical tools that actually work. First, reduce fructose load, especially liquid fructose. Fruit juice, agave, honey, and sweetened drinks deliver fructose directly to the liver. Whole fruit is different. Fiber slows absorption. Second, introduce time-based eating. A consistent 12-14-hour overnight fast reduces liver fat. The liver uses this time to export fat and reset insulin sensitivity. Third, prioritize choline-rich foods. Eggs, fish, and cruciferous vegetables support fat transport out of the liver. Fourth, move your body after meals. A 10-minute walk after eating significantly reduces post-meal glucose spikes. This lowers the burden on the liver immediately. Notice what we're doing here. We're not attacking cancer directly. We're removing the conditions it needs. And when the liver works better, insulin drops. When insulin drops, growth signaling quiets. And when growth signaling quiets, abnormal cells lose their advantage. Next, we're going to connect this to chronic inflammation and how certain foods create a protective shield around cancer cells, making them harder for your immune system to eliminate. Now let's talk about something that quietly protects cancer cells from your immune system: chronic inflammation. Inflammation itself is not the enemy. In fact, short-term inflammation is how your body heals wounds and fights infections. The problem is persistent, low-grade inflammation, the kind driven by diet, metabolic stress, and insulin resistance. Here's what's really going on inside your body. When blood sugar rises sharply and frequently, glucose begins to damage proteins and fats through a process called glycation. These damaged molecules trigger inflammatory signals throughout the body. At the same time, high insulin and fatty liver activate inflammatory pathways like NF-κB, which tells cells to stay in a constant, alert state. Now here's the paradox. Chronic inflammation doesn't make the immune system stronger. It makes it confused and exhausted. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your home alarm system going off once because of a real break-in. You respond immediately. But if that alarm goes off every day because of a faulty sensor, eventually, you stop responding with urgency. That's what chronic inflammation does to immune surveillance. Your immune system becomes less efficient at identifying and destroying abnormal cells, including cancer cells. What the research shows is that inflammatory environments allow cancer cells to avoid immune detection, resist programmed cell death, and survive longer than they should. Certain foods are especially powerful at driving this inflammatory state. Ultra-processed carbohydrates, refined vegetable oils, sugary drinks, and repeated insulin spikes all increase oxidative stress, which further inflames tissues and damages mitochondria, the energy centers of your cells. Cancer cells thrive in this chaos. Healthy cells struggle. Cancer cells adapt. This is why inflammation is now considered a hallmark of cancer progression, not just a side effect. But here's the empowering truth. Inflammation is highly responsive to daily habits. You can shift it quickly. First, stabilize blood sugar. Eat protein and fiber at every meal. Avoid naked carbohydrates eaten alone. Reduce late-night eating when insulin sensitivity is lowest. Second, add anti-inflammatory foods that actively support immune function. Extra virgin olive oil, green tea, cruciferous vegetables, omega-3 rich fish. These foods don't just reduce inflammation, they help immune cells communicate better and function more efficiently. Third, prioritize sleep. Even one night of poor sleep increases inflammatory markers. Aim for consistent sleep timing, not just duration. Fourth, manage cortisol. Chronic stress raises blood sugar even without food. Simple practices like slow breathing, light movement, or time outdoors lower cortisol and inflammation simultaneously. Notice the pattern again. We're not chasing cancer. We're restoring order. When inflammation drops, immune cells regain clarity. When insulin stabilizes, growth signals quiet down. And when metabolic stress is reduced, cancer cells lose their protective shield. If this is helping you connect the dots between food, metabolism, and immune health, consider subscribing. I share science-based strategies like this regularly to help you build resilience and long-term health naturally. Next, we'll talk about something most people never associate with food at all: blood vessels, and how certain diets actually help tumors build their own supply lines. Now let's talk about something most people never connect to food: blood vessels. Specifically, a process called angiogenesis. Angiogenesis is the body's natural ability to grow new blood vessels. You need it for wound healing, muscle recovery, and normal repair. But cancer cells hijack this process. Here's what's really going on inside your body. A tumor can't grow larger than about the size of a pinhead without its own blood supply. So cancer cells release chemical signals that tell the body, build more blood vessels here. Once those vessels form, cancer cells gain access to oxygen, glucose, amino acids, growth hormones. In other words, angiogenesis turns a small problem into a sustainable system. Now here's the critical link to food. High insulin, high glucose, and chronic inflammation accelerate angiogenic signaling. Insulin and IGF-1 don't just affect muscle and fat cells. They stimulate endothelial cells, the cells that line blood vessels, to grow and divide. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine cancer as an illegal construction site. Insulin is the building permit. Inflammation is the construction crew. And angiogenesis is the road system that brings in supplies. Remove the roads, and the project stalls. But when blood sugar spikes repeatedly, those roads keep getting paved. What the research shows is that diets high in refined carbohydrates and frequent insulin spikes are associated with increased angiogenic activity, while certain whole foods actively suppress excessive blood vessel growth. This is where the conversation shifts from fear to empowerment. Because your body already has natural anti-angiogenic defenses, and many of them are activated by what you eat. Foods like green tea, rich in catechins, berries, tomatoes, turmeric, cruciferous vegetables. These don't kill cancer cells directly. They cut off supply lines. At the same time, stabilizing insulin reduces the hormonal signal that tells blood vessels to grow unnecessarily. Now here's an important clarification. Angiogenesis is not bad. Uncontrolled angiogenesis is the problem. Your goal is balance, and balance comes from metabolic stability. So what can you do practically? First, reduce constant fueling. Avoid grazing all day. Give your body periods without incoming calories so growth signals quiet down. Second, prioritize polyphenol-rich foods. Green tea instead of sweetened beverages. whole berries instead of fruit juice, herbs and spices instead of sugar-based sauces. Third, protect your mitochondria. Excess sugar damages mitochondrial function. Healthy fats, micronutrients, and fasting windows restore it. Healthy cells with strong mitochondria resist abnormal growth signals. Cancer cells with damaged mitochondria depend even more on glucose and blood supply. Again, notice the theme. We're not attacking cancer cells head-on. We're removing their advantages. When insulin drops, angiogenic signals quiet. When inflammation resolves, immune pressure increases. And when blood vessels stop overgrowing, tumors struggle to sustain themselves. Next, we'll bring all of this together into the most actionable part of the conversation: how to eat, time, and live in a way that starves cancer biology while supporting fat loss, energy, and longevity at the same time. Now let's make this practical, because understanding biology only matters if it changes what you do tomorrow morning. Up to this point, we've talked about insulin, the liver, inflammation, and blood supply. All of those systems respond powerfully to how, when, and what you eat, not just how much. Here's what's really going on inside your body when you apply these principles correctly. Your body operates in two broad modes: growth and storage, repair and protection. You cannot be in both at the same time. Frequent eating, especially refined carbohydrates, locks you into growth mode. Strategic eating creates space for repair. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your body like a busy office. If emails arrive every 5 minutes, no one ever cleans, reorganizes, or fixes broken systems. But when emails pause, maintenance finally happens. That maintenance is what protects you. So here's a simple, sustainable daily framework. First, anchor every meal with protein. Protein slows glucose absorption. It reduces insulin spikes. It preserves muscle and metabolic rate. This could be eggs, fish, poultry, yogurt, tofu. It doesn't need to be extreme. Second, treat carbohydrates as a tool, not a default. Eat them after protein and vegetables. Prefer whole forms with fiber. Reduce refined carbs during sedentary days. This alone can dramatically flatten blood sugar curves. Third, respect time. Aim for a consistent 12-14-hour overnight fasting window. This allows insulin to fall and autophagy to activate. Even this modest window improves liver fat and insulin sensitivity. You don't need multi-day fasts. You need consistency. Fourth, eliminate liquid sugar. Fruit juice, sweetened coffee, energy drinks. These bypass satiety and overwhelm the liver. If there's one change to make immediately, it's this. Fifth, support your body's natural defenses. Green tea for polyphenols. Extra virgin olive oil for inflammation control. Cruciferous vegetables for detoxification pathways. These foods actively interfere with cancer-supporting biology. Sixth, move gently but consistently. A 10-minute walk after meals. Light resistance training a few times per week. Movement lowers insulin independent of weight loss. This is especially important if you sit for long hours. Now here's the part most people overlook. Stress management is metabolic medicine. Chronic stress raises cortisol. Cortisol raises blood sugar. Blood sugar raises insulin. So even perfect food can fail in a stressed body. Simple daily practices: breathing, time outdoors, consistent sleep, restore hormonal balance. And if this practical framework is helping you think differently about food and health, consider subscribing. I share evidence-based strategies like this regularly to help you protect your metabolism, energy, and long-term health naturally. Next, we'll close the loop, tying everything together into a clear, empowering conclusion that focuses on control, not fear, and resilience, not restriction. Let's take a step back and bring everything together. What we've talked about today is not fear-based nutrition. It's not about obsessing over every bite, and it's definitely not about blaming yourself. It's about understanding how your body actually works. Cancer cells don't magically appear because of one bad meal. They survive and grow when the internal environment quietly shifts in their favor. And what we've seen is that the worst foods are not dangerous because they're evil, but because they chronically spike insulin, overload the liver, inflame tissues, and activate growth signals that cancer cells are uniquely good at exploiting. Here's the key insight to remember. Cancer thrives in a body stuck in constant growth mode. Health thrives in a body that regularly enters repair mode. When insulin is always high, repair is postponed. When blood sugar is unstable, inflammation rises. When the liver is overwhelmed, growth signals leak everywhere. But when you stabilize blood sugar, when you give insulin a break, when you support your liver and immune system, you don't just reduce cancer-supporting biology, you improve energy, mental clarity, fat loss, hormonal balance, and long-term resilience. This is why the same strategies that help protect against cancer also support healthy aging and longevity. And the most empowering part is this: you don't need perfection. You don't need extreme diets. You need leverage. Simple habits, like eliminating liquid sugar, anchoring meals with protein, creating overnight fasting windows, and choosing whole anti-inflammatory foods, shift powerful systems inside your body within days to weeks. So here's your challenge. Don't try to do everything. Pick one change. Maybe it's cutting out fruit juice. Maybe it's a 12-hour overnight fast. Maybe it's a 10-minute walk after dinner. Try just one, and pay attention to how your body responds. Your energy will tell you. Your hunger will tell you. Your sleep will tell you. Your body is always giving feedback. And when you learn to listen and respond with intention, you regain control. If this video added value to your understanding of health, metabolism, and longevity, please like the video and subscribe. You'll join a community focused on optimizing health naturally, calmly, and based on real science, not fear or trends. Thank you for spending this time with me. Your health is not fragile, it's adaptive, and with the right signals, it knows how to protect you.